And welcome back into OneSoccer today. Andy Gareth-Ollie still with you. And yes, our special guest, Kristian Jack, who will be joining us for Match Day Live in studio when Toronto FC begin leg one, round of 16 against Mexican side Club Leon. KJ, welcome to the family. But let's dive in right now to TFC Talk. What are your expectations for the Reds?
Great to be with you all. Thanks for the invite into the family. My expectations, I suppose, are quite tempered in terms of how they're going to complete this Concacaf Champions League route in terms of whether they're going to progress or look forward. And I think internally they might be that way as well. I think my expectations are more around smaller things, you know, the opportunity to see them play a competitive game for the first time in 4.5 months under a new coach, and what kind of identity they're going to be able to go out there. Are they going to be brave enough from day one to kind of set their stall out and have that identity play out on the biggest stage of all in the Concacaf Champions League against an outstanding opponent in mid-season form? Are they going to be able to stick to the task of that? So I think some of those smaller things are what we're going to be judging, and results take care of itself after that. But I'm not too concerned about how they're going to progress or move forward at this time in the season when there's a lot of things against them.
Yeah, I think when we talk about growing MLS and growing soccer on this continent, I always do look to the CONCACAF Champions League, and I look to those matchups between MLS and Liga MX teams, and I want MLS teams to take those seriously and really go into them, as full on as much as they can. I just think, like KJ said, the circumstances are difficult this year, right? When you look at a weird preseason as it was, and then you have the COVID outbreak in the middle of it. You have a number of key injuries they're dealing with right now, a new coach. You've got just about as hard a pathway to the final of this competition as you could possibly come up with. It's going to be tough, right? So I think you start to look at, like KJ said, some of the individual things, and Chris Armas starting to kind of lay down the groundwork and the foundation of what they want to do throughout the season as a whole.
Well, with time, we'll figure out what Chris Armas is all about, because even though they've played 2 preseason games, this is the real look we're going to get under him. KJ, I know you've had a chance to speak with him a couple times. What have been your impressions of him, and even just what are your expectations of his coaching style?
Well, I think right away he brings something new to the table, away from what was there before. I think already speaking to him and some of the players, I think he's done a really good job of finding out that key balance, that in-between area that he's got to navigate, which is awkward for a new coach, and understanding and respecting how this group has been successful for most part over the last 4 to 5 seasons, while also understanding why you've got to bring in some kind of new look to the team. I think he did a tremendous job at evaluating the team under Greg Vanney last season. It's one of the reasons why he got the job, in understanding the need to come in and be more aggressive, to bring more of a pressing style. He's already talked about how we're going to play our Toronto FC style, our Toronto FC way. So I think he has a clear understanding of what went wrong for the team prior, and I think that was very important. He's an outstanding communicator. I spoke to Alejandro Pozuelo last week, and he told me he is the perfect coach right now at the right time, and I think that says a lot about him.
His mentality is a lot different, isn't it, KJ? Like, we dealt with Greg Vanney for years, very cerebral, very methodical. Armas will wear his emotion on his sleeve. Obviously, that fits me well, because he kind of makes me want to go run through a wall from time to time. And I think that's kind of the shot in the arm that this team might need, just to kind of take it in a little bit of a different direction. I think there's an aspect where people underestimate Armas heading into this job as well. I think that people forget that this manager won a Supporters' Shield in 2018 with the New York Red Bulls, and it was really New York changing their ways, changing their path, and maybe taking away some of the talent in the team that kind of left him hanging to a certain degree. So I think this is a real opportunity for Armas to bring this talented group of players together, augment the way that they play, and try to get the most out of them in a little bit of a different way than Greg Vanney did.
Get the most out of your players. Make sure the captain is on your side. Let's talk about the captain, KJ, Michael Bradley. Where do you think he could have the biggest impact on the pitch this season?
Well, I think it's clear where his identity is as a player. He's a defensive midfielder. I mean, you talk about getting the best out of him. It's clear that he's in the Chris Armas camp. It's a relationship they've gone on for a long time. Michael was a kid under his dad, Bob, in Chicago, and Chris was a player. They've known each other for some time. I think the biggest interesting thing will be, developing that midfield. When Toronto FC prior to 2020 were winning in the biggest moments and the biggest nights, they were winning midfield battles. The Osorio, Delgado, Bradley matchup was fantastic to watch how they combined. They only played 3 times last season, whistle to whistle together in the MLS, and I think that impacted it. The biggest thing I think for me now is and obviously the new identity and style will be there. Michael will remain as one of the top defensive midfielders in the league, but do they play a double pivot? I think that's important. Do they push Marky Delgado a little bit further and try and win that central midfield battle while still having the ability to win higher up the pitch?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see as well just what Chris Armas kind of asks of Michael Bradley. Does he ask, and he's hinted at this, I think, maybe asking a bit more of him, getting forward a bit more, being more of a kind of box-to-box presence as he was earlier in his career. I think there's no doubt that Michael Bradley can still do that. We've seen on some of the biggest games TFC have had, MLS Cup finals, his ability to cover every blade of grass and be a real presence in the middle of the park. My question is, can he do it every single week? Can he be that type of player on a regular basis, right? And MLS is a unique beast. It's not about being the best team in the league necessarily throughout the entire season. It's about being good enough and then peaking at the right time of year and making sure your top players are ready to go and as fresh as possible and in the best possible shape when the playoffs come around. So it's one of the really interesting storylines to see for me is how Michael Bradley is going to be deployed in this system, which is going to look a lot different, I think.
Speaking of fresh, it looks like we could see some fresh legs with Toronto FC this season. A lot of players under the age of 21. KJ, is there one in particular who you think has the potential of having an impact on the roster?
Well, I guess it's great for Toronto FC fans that there's multiple choices to this answer. We could go in many different directions. I think everyone would agree Jaquil Marshall really long-term probably. I think it's important, first of all, I think Toronto FC have got to allow these players to fail. And I think that it's the next frontier for producing talent, that it's one thing to say we're not bringing in players because we're going to give these guys opportunities. You've got to stick to the task and occasionally allow them to succeed and occasionally allow them to come through failure. But to answer your question directly, Andy, I'm going to go for Ralph Priso in midfield. I just think that he brings so much to that midfield. Again, he can sit deeper with Michael Bradley. He can play in a three with Osorio or Delgado. He's got a wonderful left foot. He's direct. He goes forward. He brings great balance into that midfield as well. And I think he's at the age that can start making significant difference and playing regular minutes as a regular in that midfield for me.
I'm attending the Priso party as well, KJ. I know that Greg Vanny wanted him on a first-team contract earlier than he was. Only played 5 games last year, but he looked assured, didn't he? The one thing TFC had to do over the course of this transition was get younger, and they're doing it organically. I think Priso absolutely fits the bill. And for a team that lacks true wide players, I think that Jacob Schaffelberg is going to get a decent look in the team this year. Kind of found his way on the outside looking in last season, but he had a great camp by all accounts with Canada in January, and if you can provide that pace that he showed when he first came into the first team, the ability to press a little bit and do so with confidence as well, then TFC could have another very good young Canadian player in the mix.
Great stuff, gentlemen. KJ, get out of those jogging pants. You have to put some dress pants on tomorrow when we see you in studio for the game.
Not too dressy.